Hello, friends, and welcome back to Dare Me to Prosper. This is episode 15. I am Avery, your host, and today we're talking about how to understand and receive intuitive guidance or messages from spirit, your higher self, the other side. Basically, how to get communication, how to receive and understand communication from higher beings. You guys really seem to love the deep spiritual topics the most out of everything I've done thus far. And so we're going to dig a little deeper into those things today. Now, to give you a little bit of background on where I'm coming from for this episode, I am certainly someone that believes in God, in spirit, in the universe. I might use those terms interchangeably. I also believe in spirit guides and angels and that you can communicate with them. I believe that everybody has a team on the other side that is there to support and guide them. You do not have to believe that in order to get something out of this episode or to communicate with the other side at all. But if I mention that, that is where I am coming from and certainly how I communicate with the other side. You could also communicate with past loved ones or ancestors. There is, in my opinion, an entire world, an entire spiritual realm full of beings and souls that you could communicate with. And so in this episode, we're really going to dig into how to know who you're communicating with, what you're communicating with, how to go about communicating, how those messages come in, how to understand them, and all of the nuances of what that looks like. Because all of us, in my opinion, from what I believe, all of us come into the world with a full support system, right? We all come in, we're constantly being guided, we're constantly being communicated to or with, whether we know it or not. It's just a matter of how aware or unaware you are of this guidance and of this communication. The more aware that you are, the more accurately and intentionally you can follow the guidance that you receive. Because ultimately, the guidance that most of us are receiving from God, from your guides, from ancestors, from whoever, is for your highest good. It is for your benefit. And so the more aware you are of this communication and the more you can tap into it, the more you can come into alignment with where you are supposed to be or where you can align with what will be for your ultimate highest good. Now, this communication can be like a little internal nudge, and it can be about silly things or small things like what food is or isn't aligned with your body. Or it could be around big decisions, huge life decisions, like whether or not to move across the country or what to do in a certain relationship. But the point is that guidance is always available. The answers are always there and available to you to tap into. It's just, again, a matter of how aware you are and how easily or not easily you can kind of tune into and hear the guidance that comes through. Okay, because like, for example, what a psychic is, somebody who considers themselves to be a psychic, for example, is really just somebody that came into the world already really tapped into these gifts. Or maybe they weren't as tapped in and they really just felt called to develop that over time. But that's somebody who is just very tuned in. They have their radio set to exactly the right station where they can receive those messages very easily. And they can do that through lots of different ways, like we've talked about in a previous episode. We talked about spiritual gifts. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, I would definitely go back and listen to that episode where we describe all of the different ways, all of the different gifts that you might be able to tap into, because some people are going to more easily hear communication in one way and other people are going to easily hear communication in another way, whether it's visual, whether it's audible, whether it's cognitive understanding. You know, there's so many different ways that it might be easier for you, just like we all naturally have different gifts and different inclinations. The same thing goes here. So there's a good chance that you already have been hearing and maybe even taking this communication or this guidance and applying it to your life. You just didn't know that maybe it came straight from God. Maybe it came straight from a guide or a past loved one. You just had an inkling or had a nudge or felt called to do something and you ran with it. And maybe it came from you and your own soul, your own higher self, your own higher guidance, or maybe it didn't. Ultimately, you are the only one who can decipher where these messages are coming from and what you intuitively feel like is guidance or not. Also, if you hear my kids screaming in the background, it is their spring break. And so they are home and very loud. And so I apologize. I'm not sure if that's going to pick up or not, but I'm just going to mention that. Now, just to touch on how we communicate and how this works, we are all made up of energy, right? We all have an energy field or an aura that we constantly use to interact with the energy of other people and things around us. But unlike your physical body, energy is not localized to a specific place or a specific time. Energy can interact with any other energy, not based on what is nearby, but based on energetic frequencies that are similar. So basically, I'm making the point that time or space doesn't matter here. In terms of who or what you can communicate with, energy is all about frequency. So quantum entanglement, for example, if you're familiar with that, is the concept that particles can influence each other no matter the distance between them, right? It's similar to a radio tower. You don't have to be right next to the radio station, like the actual building, the tower, the station, to hear what the radio signals are putting out. You just have to have your radio tuned into the right frequency, the right station. So the only difference here is that unlike the radio station, there's no limit on distance. It's only a matter of how close or far you are from the frequency that you are trying to connect with. So you are like a radio tower, basically, that is always on. You are always able to receive signals all the time, awake, asleep, anytime. But how loud is your volume? Are you listening to the guidance? Are you tuned into the right station? Do you treat it like insignificant background noise? Like maybe you're getting guidance, but you just think, oh, those are just, nonsense thoughts. I don't listen to that. Are you tuned in? And because this relies on frequency, if you're familiar with the idea of how your emotions are tied to energy frequencies, maybe I'll link a chart in the show notes because this could be really helpful. But basically, every emotion that you have has an energetic frequency. The highest energetic frequencies are emotions like love and peace and just like pure bliss, right? The lowest energetic frequencies are things like hopelessness or powerlessness. And then, anger is also low, but not quite as low, rage or sadness in general. There's a scale of emotions, and every emotion is higher or lower on this energetic frequency scale. And you're always somewhere on that scale. Even if you're just feeling neutral, you're going about your day, you're not really feeling any sort of heightened emotion, you're somewhere on that scale at all times, which means you're always tuned in. You are the radio station that's always on. And your frequency is always somewhere, whether it's high or low. Hopefully, it's somewhat high day to day, right? That's what we're hoping for. When you are wanting to communicate with God, with spirit, with whatever, you want to be at the highest possible frequency to get that communication. If you are at a low frequency, you're only going to be a match to low vibrational beings. Now, this is why I don't know if you've ever been in an emotional state where you're really distraught, you're really upset, you're sad, you're just experiencing really negative emotions, and you cry out for help maybe, or you cry out to God, or you feel like I need help in this moment. I need to know that everything's going to be okay. It's very difficult to communicate with your guides or communicate with spirit when you are in that emotional state because you are not a match to the super high frequency. It doesn't mean that you're alone. It doesn't mean that, God or your guides or your higher self cannot help you or don't see you. But in terms of hearing communication and receiving messages, if you're seeking those high vibrational messages from these high vibrational beings, but you're in a really low negative state, you cannot receive those messages. It's very difficult. And it doesn't mean that you constantly have to be in a state of bliss in order to hear anything or in order to receive messages, but basically just making the point that your emotions and where you are in your energy definitely play a big part, right? Like your energy is the kind of the phone line that you're using to connect. And so you want to make sure, because you want to connect, because we can't see, or most of us, some people can, you can't see with your visual eyes what you're communicating with or who you're communicating with, especially if you're kind of just getting started on this journey. The best way to kind of ensure that you're not connecting with something that you don't want to connect with is making sure that you are raising your vibration to be a match with good, positive energetic beings. I hope this makes sense. I feel like this is a very difficult concept to fully describe, especially if you are someone that is not super familiar with this and this sounds like total BS or totally out there or totally crazy, because not everybody is on board with this, and that's totally okay. You might not be here. But regardless, I think it's really important for all of us to have an understanding of how our energy works, okay? Because even if you don't believe in, say, spirit guides, you can't not believe in quantum physics, right? This is just how this works. Your energy field attracts things that are a match to your vibration. That's just physics. So it's important to keep in mind, though, if you are wanting to communicate with the other side, just be aware of where you are energetically. Like sometimes if I'm trying to get a message, if I'm trying to tap into the other side, if I need guidance on something, I will sit down, clear my mind. I typically like to ask, can I get help from my spirit guides, from my higher self in raising my vibration in this moment? Can you help me to become an energetic match to this high frequency that I'm attempting to get on? I like to ask for help for everything. You could also just set the intention, like I'm sitting down, I'm clearing my mind, and now in this moment, I am raising my vibration to the highest possible vibration that I can reach in this moment. Now, if you're somebody super sensitive like me, you can literally feel it happening inside your body. Like I get chills. Anytime I do that, anytime I set that intention or ask for help, immediately I get chills and I can sense it feels like energetically a weight lifted off my shoulders. I don't even know how to explain it, but it feels like I get lighter in that moment. And I've become attuned to that now the more that I do it, but you might even be able to feel it happening. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself because I wanted to talk about for a second, how do you know who or what you're communicating with, right? Because I don't want to scare you. There might be people that are like, whoa, wait a minute. Well, now I'm scared. I don't want to connect with anything negative or demonic or, what. I don't want to do that. First of all, I think that is much less common than people might believe it is. Energetically, you will likely know. I don't think it's something that you need to hold fear around. One, because I don't think it's as likely as you might think it is. And two, holding the energy of fear is only going to do the opposite of what you want to do. So I would not hold any fear around that. But I just want to acknowledge that yes, it's tricky because there is an entire, like I said, spiritual world, a whole realm of energies that you could be communicating with. And so receiving divine guidance is tricky because it's kind of like walking into a room of 100 people blindfolded and then trying to guess who you're talking to. But in this case, I would say it's not so important to decipher who you're talking to in terms of like, is it spirit? Is it a spirit guide? Is it an ancestor? Is it your higher self? Because you can set that intention and align with who you want to align with. But what's more important than that is that the guidance is coming from a loving and aligned source, a high vibrational energy, which goes back to what we were talking about with being a match to that high vibrational energy. So rather than trying to think, who am I connecting with or who am I talking to, which you still could and can do, it's more important, though, to focus on, does this communication feel like it's for my highest good and coming from a place of love? And so how do you know that? How do you decipher if it's a trustworthy source that you are connecting with? First of all, when you connect or when you are attempting to communicate, or when you feel like maybe you're just receiving a message, maybe you weren't attempting and you just feel like, oh, I just got a download. I just got some sort of information. Where is this coming from? First of all, how does it feel in your body? Do you feel safe and confident? Does it feel fearful? Does it give you anxiety? Because remember, you're tuning your radio station to whatever frequency that you're on. So if you lower your frequency into a state of fear and worry, automatically you're going to open yourself up to connecting with those lower vibrational entities. If you feel confident and safe, you're already on a higher frequency of love and safety and in a better position to connect with higher vibrational sources of communication. Your intention, though, is the most powerful tool that you have. Your intention and your belief are what direct your energy. Your intention and your belief are what direct your energy. So even the Bible talks about this, right? How faith can move mountains. If you believe and you set an intention that you want to communicate with spirit, you will. If you feel doubt or you feel like you're making something up or you're just being silly, you'll do that. Your intention and your belief is like the engine that takes you to where you want to go. Because if you receive some sort of information or communication and it feels scary or it feels like some sort of cryptic warning, that is not from spirit, from God. Even if you were to receive communication that was meant to be some sort of warning, it will never come through like fear and anxiety. It would come through like, hey, you know what? I feel like I want to take a different way home today. Or I feel like I don't want to go to this event tonight. I'm going to listen to my gut. It's not going to come through like, be scared. Something awful is going to happen if XYZ. You will never receive higher guidance from a high vibrational source that comes in like fear. That is not how that works. Fear is a very low vibrational energy. So these high vibrational sources are never going to feed you fearful communication. So let's give you some examples, because for me personally, this is just me, but this is what this looks like. Sometimes I am the one seeking out information. Sometimes I sit down and I go, I want to communicate with my higher self. I want to ask this specific question about my life or a decision that I need to make or what have you. So I sit down, I clear my mind, and I try to tap in specifically to that high vibrational, like my higher self, my higher guidance, my higher mind, right? My soul. And I've been doing this for enough years now that comes somewhat easily to me. Sometimes I want to sit down and maybe I want to ask my spirit team about something else. It just totally depends on the situation. Maybe sometimes I'm a little spooked and I want to ask angels for protection, and that makes me feel safe, so I'll do that. I have specific grandparents and I really just want to reach out to past loved ones that I have a specific question for. And the way that I do that is just simply by setting the intention. I like to quiet my mind, go inside, and it's kind of like doing a meditation. You could actually do a full-blown meditation, and that might help you kind of get into the mental state that you need to get into to open up that line of communication. The more that you practice it, though, it's like a muscle. The more that you practice it, the easier it will become, and the easier it will be to recognize what is a communication or message from somewhere else and what is your own thoughts. And we'll talk about that more in a second too. But my point is that you could communicate with whatever feels most comfortable for you. So if the idea of spirit guides or a spirit team that is like totally off the wall for you, that's not you, totally fine. You can just communicate with God, or you can just communicate with a past loved one. Whatever feels the most natural to you is totally fine and where you should start. Also, in terms of frequencies, I want to mention it's also never a bad idea to either ask for protection or maybe envision yourself protected from negative energy, especially if that's something that you feel concerned about and you want to make sure that you are not connecting with something that feels dangerous or negative. You can always ask God. You can always ask angels. And maybe we need to do another episode maybe with somebody that where we go more into depth of angels and what are angels and who are the archangels and all of these things, because there really is, I think, a lot of clutter and confusion around the spirit realm. And it feels scary for a lot of people just because there's so much information and it's very overwhelming. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I have all the answers or that I know everything about what's on the other side and how the universe works, because I certainly don't. But I feel much more confident now in the other side and in divine messages and communication because I took time to really ask questions and learn about things. And so I think if that's something you haven't done, it makes sense, and I understand why it might feel a little bit scary or unsettling, because there's this whole realm of things that you can't see. And anytime we can't see something, or anytime something feels really unfamiliar, it feels scary to us, and that makes sense. So that's a side note, but I just wanted to touch on the fact that if this is you and you feel unsettled, you can always ask for protection. You can ask God, you can ask angels, you can ask whoever. Or you can just set the intention yourself to envision yourself in like a bubble of light, to basically place a shield around you. Because again, everything is energetic. That feels funny to us because we live in this 3D world, right? We're not used to the unseen. We're used to everything being tangible. We can see it, we can touch it. So a lot of us are inclined to think that if we can't see it, it doesn't exist. If we can't touch it, if we are not used to it, it can't work that way. It must not exist. Energy does not work that way. There is no time and space limit here. All you have to do is set an energetic, right? Your thoughts are energy. So you are setting an energetic intention with your mind, and just the fact that you've done that means it exists. And so I think a lot of this process too is just really being able to trust yourself, trust the unseen, trust that you need to tap more into how things feel and your gut feelings more than what you can see, what you can touch. Because again, we're so used to living in this tangible world. When you start developing your spiritual gifts, or you start wanting to tap into this spiritual side, you really have to kind of undo your mindset that things that we cannot see must not exist. You have to get yourself used to being able to trust what you cannot see and go based on what you feel intuitively, what you feel in your gut. Because your intuition is your eyes. Your intuition is what you use to see in the spirit world. That is your protection. It's your roadmap in this unseen world. So I feel like I keep going off on tangents, but let's talk a little bit about like how the communication comes in. What are the different ways that you can receive divine messages or guidance? Because how you receive information will be a process that's very unique to you. Again, going back to your spiritual gifts, different people are more inclined to have different ways that are most available to them when receiving communication. For me personally, I tend to receive a lot of messages cognitively, or I guess it would technically be clairaudience, but where I'm hearing things in my mind. And when I say I'm hearing things, I'm not like hearing other voices or other people's voices in my mind. It comes in like a thought, except these thoughts didn't come from me. And so sometimes that's really tricky for people because you automatically assume, well, it came from my brain, it's my thought. And so learning to decipher what comes in as kind of a spiritual message or guidance versus your own thought is sometimes really tricky. So for me, how I have learned to kind of decipher it over time is your thoughts typically go in a train of thoughts. You think one thing, which leads you to think another thing, which leads you to think another thing. You're usually not just popping thoughts out of thin air. An intuitive message, though, will often come in like just a totally random thought, just out of nowhere. I was not leading up to this thought. This was completely out of left field. It often, for me, it doesn't always have to be, but it often will feel that way. I have also now noticed, now that I've been practicing this for a few years, something that I will pick up on is it's almost like it has a different, because it does. It has a different energetic frequency. Like there's a way that my thoughts feel inside of my mind. And then when I receive a message from elsewhere, it's like, I don't know how to explain it. It feels a little bit different. Like it has a different energetic frequency. So it kind of has a signature that I am now able to recognize, oh, that's coming from spirit, or that's coming from my higher self, or whatever. I'm not always able to decipher where it's coming from, but usually now I can pick up on, oh, that feels a little bit different signature. That wasn't me. I also receive a lot of guidance through songs. I cannot tell you the amount of times that all of a sudden a song has popped into my head, and it'll be a song I literally haven't heard in 15 years. A song that, from the 90s, I didn't hear it recently, but it speaks directly. Like say the chorus gets stuck in my head and it speaks directly to a situation that I'm going through, or it offers me some kind of encouragement. And I'm like, I haven't heard this song in years. I forgot this song even existed. But now I can't get it out of my head, and it just so happens to speak directly to a situation I'm dealing with. That happens to me often. So it can be literally anything. You might receive messages, again, through music, through a cognitive just kind of download. Maybe for you, it's through visions. My sister, and I want to have her on to talk more about this, but she really gets like visuals in her head. Some people get it really strong that way. It could be through a spoken message in your mind. It could just be seeing angel numbers or synchronicities everywhere around you. It could be seeing a written message around you on a sign that you drive by, or whatever it is. But if you see something or you receive something and automatically your mind goes, whoa, that was uncanny, that was weird, it's likely some sort of divine guidance. Because again, truly, there are no such thing as coincidences. Everything is energetic alignment or misalignment. So if you're seeing a synchronicity or something that just weirdly fits your situation, or you're weirdly seeing this number over and over again, or you keep getting these signs, that is an energetic alignment. It's purposeful. But many of us see those things or receive these types of messages or guidance all the time, and we just dismiss it, right? Or we think, oh, that's cool. Oh, how funny. What a coincidence. And we dismiss it, or we don't take it, to mean anything other than just a silly little synchronicity. But if you are aware and you're tuned in and you're looking for, or you're open to really receiving these messages with some sort of meaning, that can really help you become more aligned to wherever it is that you're supposed to be. But going back to how you receive messages, most of us have one or two ways maybe, or however many that you most strongly are tuned into, where it's most easy for you to receive messages or guidance. For you, maybe it's music. For you, maybe it's really visuals. For you, maybe it's, cognitive or hearing a message in your mind. It could be any of those or something totally random that I haven't even mentioned. It's a little bit different for everybody. But remember, it's going to be a muscle that you have to strengthen. If you have never really even attempted to receive guidance intentionally or on purpose, and now you want to start doing that, it's going to feel really funny at first. It's going to feel like, I am making this up. That was definitely my thought. It is a muscle you have to strengthen, and you really have to trust. You have to be open-minded. You have to be open to, maybe that was a message. Maybe I am hearing something from the other side. And the more open that you are to it, the more you open the door to letting those things in. But you have to trust, and you have to practice doing that over and over again. And you will soon strengthen that line of communication. Some people come into the world like children. Children often come in with very open receptors to this. Children often come in, and that's why you have so many kids, or maybe you as a kid, who get really scared at night because we're seeing things or we're hearing things. And adults, we brush it off because we've been cultured to believe that we're just making it up. When in fact, children are very tuned into the spiritual world because they come in very open. But then a lot of times, because of fear or because of whatever, we learn to shut it down in childhood. And so we suppress those abilities. We suppress those lines of communication. We suppress those spiritual gifts because we're scared, or we're taught that we're just making it up, or it's not real, or whatever. And now there's some people that are able to keep those spiritual gifts going throughout childhood. You have these psychics who came in really open, and they were communicating from childhood, or they were seeing things from childhood, and they were able to either keep that gift open while they were growing up, or maybe they shut it down and brought it back online later. But the point is that we all have these abilities, but we are cultured or taught, or out of fear, we just shut them down. It's always there. The ability stays there, but you have to tap into it. You have to open it back up. You have to trust it, and you have to practice it. So now it's only been about 5 years or so that I've really been tuning into this and attempting to strengthen this muscle. And I still would like to become much more adept at it. But now I am able to really tune into things that I never would have thought I would have been able to do 5 years ago. This is also another area where meditation becomes really important, because meditation, quieting your mind, similar to how it's difficult to hear someone talk in a room where music is blasting, it's also difficult to hear a message in a mind that's completely filled with other thoughts. So meditation is a simple way to clear and quiet your mind and basically put yourself into a place of receiving so that you can more easily hear messages that are intended for you. It also helps to set an intention for meditation. So whether that's a guided meditation, which can be useful if you're a beginner or if you're having trouble hearing or receiving messages and you really just feel like you need more time to get into that quiet headspace, a guided meditation where you're using a visualization or an intention to help you get into that position can be really helpful. But the important thing is to slow down, to go inside, and be open to hearing whatever comes through. You really have to be open-minded, because your ego thoughts, right, that you're used to, you're used to living in this 3D tangible world through your ego thoughts. And those thoughts are going to try to tell you, you're being crazy, this is weird, we're not used to this, okay? That's just what your brain has been trained to do. But like I said in last week's episode where we talked about training your brain and training your mind, you just have to untrain some of those thoughts that you've constantly, been used to your whole life to say, oh, this is wacky, this is weird, I don't know how to do this. But once you start practicing and you're open-minded and you're trusting, you'll be able to tap in. And sometimes you might get communication right away, And other times it might be total silence or you feel blocked. And that still happens to me now. But both of these things are normal. Just remember, like anything else, it's a learning curve. You have to be patient. It's a process. It's a muscle. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And like I touched on before, deciphering the difference between your own thoughts and a guidance or communication from somewhere else, it just takes practice. And for the first few times, maybe you just need to let yourself assume, just start with thinking maybe that was me. Maybe that was outside communication. Maybe that was guidance from God. Maybe that was guidance from my spirit guide. I don't know, but I'm going to stay open-minded, because if you constantly shut it down and think, no, that was just me. That was just my thought. That was just my brain. You're still training yourself to shut those messages out. But just remember to keep kind of practicing that deciphering skill, to think, was this a train of thoughts that led me to this? Or was this a standalone message? Because oftentimes, if I receive a guidance, and again, it could be something I'm seeking out, like I'm looking for an answer, or sometimes I'll literally just be in the middle of washing dishes and I'll get, boom, a download, a thought. And that's when I know for sure, okay, this did not come from me. Another strange thing, this is total side note, another strange thing that has started happening to me, I've noticed only since I've been on this kind of spiritual journey, spiritual awakening of sorts. It's always when I'm sidetracked, I'm doing something, I'm doing a chore, I'm doing something mundane, I will get flashbacks. Either it's a flashback of a dream that I had, and I don't even know how I know this, but it'll be a flashback of a dream that I had years ago and I had totally forgotten about. I hate dreams. My dreams scare me. And so I've kind of learned to, I think I've subconsciously shut my dreams out. I don't remember many of my dreams, and I kind of prefer it that way. But I'll get a flashback of a dream I had years ago, and I'll just think, where did that come from? And I will cognitively know it's a dream I had years prior that doesn't seem to even necessarily hold any importance, but it's kind of like, I almost feel like my brain is like unlocking new levels. And every time I unlock something, little old memories escape. And it's very strange. So sometimes it'll be a dream. Sometimes it'll just be a random childhood memory that I completely forgot about, because I do have some childhood trauma and I've actually forgotten most of my childhood. I think compared to most people, I don't have a whole lot of memories. I can tell you highlights, but I really can't tell you what I was doing at certain ages or grades, or I just have no idea. I don't remember. But I will get random flashbacks, random memories, and I'm like, that's so wild. I completely forgot about that. I haven't thought about this, or I didn't remember this. It's very strange. So again, it's kind of like the more that you open up these channels of communication, the more that you become open, the more you can receive. And again, always go back to, how does this communication feel? Does this feel like, wow, that was something I really needed to hear, or this thought feels helpful to me? Don't confuse messages with your own anxiety, because again, you will never receive higher guidance that makes you feel scared or afraid or anxious. So if it's making you feel that way, that you can toss out, because that is not higher guidance. That is your ego mind feeding you fear. Any sort of higher guidance is going to feel like a calm, subtle knowing. It's going to feel grounded. It might be kind of out of left field. It might be kind of random, but it's not going to feel chaotic or unsafe. But as long as you know that, and as long as you feel protected, whether you've asked for energetic protection or whether you just know you're in a higher vibrational state and you feel comfortable, the bottom line is just trust, because self-doubt can block your intuition. Learning to trust what you hear is the first step in really strengthening that spiritual muscle. Another thing I want to say too is that often I have noticed that when messages come in that are guidance from a higher source, they are also, I will notice, often phrased in a way that is very, I don't even know how to say, mature, very wise. Usually it's like not something that I would have phrased that way. And I wish I could think of a more specific example right now. I don't usually write these things down, and maybe I should. That's not true. Sometimes I do write them down, and I would recommend writing them down, because if you're like me, you'll totally forget and you'll wish you remembered. But I will say oftentimes, and I don't want to say that like your guides or your ancestors or even spirit can't use humor, because that's another wild thing. If you're not familiar with this, you absolutely can receive messages that are maybe tongue-in-cheek or a little bit humorous or a little bit, there is very much still personality in the spirit realm. At the same time, because it's a much higher vibration, a higher frequency, it's always coming in from a very wise place as well. And so I will notice that a lot of times these messages or the communication that I get will be very like, oh, that was deep, or oh, that, yeah, wow, that makes sense. Almost in a way where it's like your therapist says something to you sometimes and you just go, oh, oh, yeah, okay, I needed to hear that. Yep. Oh, you put me in my place with that one. You know what I mean? Like just something that comes in and it's like, ooh, yeah, yep, you're right. Also, there are times I will say now, and this is especially if you are trying to get guidance and you just feel like you're getting silence or you're getting blocked. One thing that I now know to be true is that if I am asking for guidance or for a specific answer around what should I do about this situation, but it's specifically something, it's like a decision that I need to make, I will not get an answer. I will just get silence because spirit is never going to override your free will, your spirit guides, your ancestors, your whatever. Even if it's your higher self speaking to you, you will get guidance. You will never be told this is the choice you need to make or that is the choice you need to make because you have free will. And that's a very important universal law, especially here on earth, is that we have free will and that cannot be overridden. So if you are asking an outside source to make a decision for you, specifically a high vibrational outside source, you're never going to be told what decision to make. You can be given guidance, but more likely you'll be told something along the lines of, what do you feel? What does it feel like to you? What makes the most sense to you? You need to trust your own guidance. You need to trust your own intuition because that free will is really important. So it might be more helpful to ask, like, say you're trying to figure out whether to take a job and move across the country or to keep a relationship or get rid of it. You could ask things around that situation. Like, I don't know what's the right thing to do. Help me find clarity here. Help me understand where each decision will lead me and things like that. But if you're just asking, what do I do? A lot of times you're not going to get that in like a little wrapped up box with a bow on it, right? That's going to be a decision that at the end of the day, you can receive guidance, but you're going to have to make on your own. So I have tapped into spirit again to ask about things like what career path to take or what's most aligned with me. What is my purpose? Advice around relationships, parenting advice, help with difficult emotions in general. I've also hired psychics and past life regressionists to get information that way, which I believe is just as valuable as long as you trust the person that you're working with. That is really important. But I do believe that can also be a really valuable thing to utilize. Because sometimes, especially when you're seeking answers surrounding things where you really care about the outcome, it's very difficult to receive guidance because you're not neutral. You're very invested. So it's difficult to get a clear answer because you have a lot of emotion around the answer that you want. And so your emotions will block answers from coming through. Even during my past life regression session that I did, which I will talk about that more in another episode. I would love to have her on as well. It was really interesting. But there were certain answers that came through incredibly easy. And there was other answers that I couldn't get anything. Like I really couldn't hear the answer, like because I had given her questions that she was then asking me when I was in that meditative state and speaking to my higher self, and she would ask questions, and some of them came through like lickety split, super easy, and some of them I was like, oh, I know, I can tell. I can feel my ego blocking this answer because my ego mind really wanted to be like, I want this answer. And I wanted that answer so bad that I couldn't really hear a clear answer from what I was supposed to be receiving from my higher self. So sometimes in these cases, it can be really helpful to kind of outsource that, whether it's tarot cards, whether it's a psychic, some sort of energy reader, whatever. Having somebody else who is a neutral party tap into that can sometimes be the route to go if you just have too much emotion around a certain situation. Because the most accurate information comes through when you have no insistence upon what the answer will be. Like even full-blown psychics have a really hard time getting information around their own questions and their own lives because we all have emotions tied to those things. So if you can let go of needing the answer to be something specific, you have a better chance of getting a clear answer. Otherwise, it would be helpful to probably seek the gifts of another spiritually tapped in person. So I hope that this episode really helped you feel more prepared and more open to really seeking out answers or receiving messages from the other side. Again, it's such a process, so just don't forget that. Try to trust, try to be open-minded. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please do not forget to leave the podcast a review. I am going to start reading the reviews on the podcast just as a way to show you guys that I see you and that I'm grateful. So if you have not left a written review, please do that. It would mean the absolute world to me. You can always email me at daremetoprosper@gmail.com if you have any suggestions or questions, if you need to communicate with me. And I will see you guys in the next episode of Dare Me to Prosper.